Tonight, World in Action takes you on a journey, 200 miles right across the country, from the west coast to the east. We will show you some of the most beautiful scenery in Britain, the role of one giant company in polluting it, and why the public can't find out what's being dumped on the land, in the air, and in the waterways. Through this one outlet, the company pumps out 1.5 million gallons of chemical waste an hour, which ends up in the North Sea. Near its vast underground waste dumps, chemicals are finding their way into the waterways, and surrounding woodland is being turned into a lunar landscape. And year after year, gas leaks from its plants have threatened whole communities. The company is ICI, the largest manufacturing company in Britain. Suppliers of everything from plastics to paint, from fertilizers to heart drugs. ICI has announced huge spending programs to clean up its act and is promoting a greener image in the media. But there's another side to ICI. Tonight we're going to show you how its plants, one after the other, are polluting the environment. And we're also going to show you how this most famous British firm has broken the law, not just once, but time and time again. The start of our journey, a river that rises in the Pennines, flows through some of the wildest and most scenic countryside in England, and finally reaches the North Sea near Middlesbrough. Some local fishermen still remember the Tees as a playground.
That was called the seal sands, where you could go on there, there'd be up to 200 seals up basking in the sun on there, on the low tide. As many seals you could count, and they're all there, and they're all gone.
You used to go crossing the dinghy to get some worms. It used to frighten you, there's that many seals that was there. So as you went over, they were straight in the water till you left, and then they went straight back on again.
You could go get mussels, cockles, clams, winkles, and you could eat them. There's no notices to say that you didn't have to eat them, because it was poisoned. Everything was clean them days.
Now the Water Authority classifies this stretch of the Tees Category D, grossly polluted, the worst quality possible.
This bridge is one of our famous suicide jumps, and it was said if you survived the fall, you'd most probably die of pollution before you could swim out.
Environmental groups blame the decline in river quality on the numerous industrial plants along the Tees. Among them are two giant ICI complexes, Wilton on the south bank and Billingham on the north. Greenpeace has made them a campaign target.
The thing we found particularly on the Tees is that ICI are the biggest polluter of the Tees. They have the biggest discharges here in the Tees, some of the biggest discharges anywhere from the UK into the North Sea. And the worrying thing is that so much of this is going on completely unmonitored, it's completely unregulated.
ICI dismissed these accusations. They say they're spending £75 million a year on environmental protection.
We are environmentally concerned, very much so. We have a programme of continuous improvement. All our sites have plans to improve performance on their environment. And we're spending millions and millions of pounds each year to make sure that we can implement those improvement plans.
There is no public record of exactly what any company pumps out, so we took to the river to test the water quality for ourselves. First we went up Billingham Beck, which flows alongside the ICI works at Billingham and then into the Tees. We discovered a number of pipes and outlets pumping ICI waste directly into the beck. We took samples of the effluent and had them analysed at an independent laboratory. They identified 17 different substances.
Among them were carbon tetrachloride found at a concentration of 6 milligrams a litre and methyl methacrylate at 18 milligrams a litre.
We took the results of our sample to chemical pathologist Dr. Alistair Hay of Leeds University.
This sample has two chemicals there in very high concentrations. They are methyl methacrylate and carbon tetrachloride. Now, carbon tetrachloride is on restricted lists in the EEC and on restricted lists for some North Sea countries and the United States. And it's there because it is a cancer-causing chemical. But in addition, this sample has a very high acidity. And because it is so acid, it is unlikely that you're going to get any animal life surviving in the water.
We're not happy about Billingham Beck. We do put materials into Billingham Beck, We have been working for some time to produce a scheme to avoid the need to put materials into Billingham Beck, and we shall be announcing very shortly a scheme that will remove effluent from our premises into the Beck.
There will be no effluent coming out into the Beck then?
When we implement this scheme, which will be a multi-million-pound scheme, that will take totally effluent from our site out of Billingham Beck.
Where will it go, the effluent?
The effluent will go down into the Tees under reduced amounts.
Next on our river journey, a little way downstream from the Beck, we found the biggest ICI outfall yet, pouring waste directly into the Tees. But nothing had prepared us for what was further downstream, on the south bank of the river. This is the Dabholme Gut, an outfall from one of the biggest chemical plants in Britain, ICI Wilton. The gut can't be reached by the public over land. You have to approach it by river and then walk half a mile. ICI didn't welcome the cameras.
This outfall is the biggest single chemical discharge from the UK, from any chemical company, into the North Sea. It's a staggering 34 million gallons a day, which works out at about 10 billion gallons a year. That's about over 1 million gallons an hour. We simply don't know the environmental and ecological costs of discharging such vast amounts of chemicals every single day out into the Tees and into the North Sea.
We took a sample from the waters of the Dabholme Gut. The independent laboratory found traces of 28 different substances.
Among them, benzene had a concentration of 0.5 milligrams a litre and chloroform at 0.7 milligrams a litre.
There are several that worry me. Benzene and chloroform are two cancer-causing chemicals, and they are there in high concentrations. Chloroform is one of those chemicals that was on the British restricted list but has now been taken off because industry said that it wasn't there in worrying concentrations, not in water in worrying concentrations. But your results clearly suggest that it is.
Have the enforcing authorities the capability to check on what a company like ICI is putting out?
No, they simply do not have the resources. Often they don't have the analytical capabilities, and often they're looking for completely other different sorts of chemicals. So they're not able to totally identify everything that companies like ICI are putting out through their pipes.
But ICI say their effluent is regularly monitored by the authorities and by the company itself.
And you are confident that you know exactly what and how much you're discharging from your plants?
Yes, I've already said, we know the materials coming from our plant.
Well, we've seen an internal memo from one of your Wilton departments, and it says that monitoring is rudimentary and of little value for managing the system. How do you explain that?
Well, it just does not square with the facts. I can't comment on the source of that, but what I can comment on is what we actually do. And I can assure you that we have a very large amount of effort going in, a lot of expenditure to check our effluents and to make sure that they are in compliance with the authority requirements on it.
In the same internal memo, ICI's own research and technology department told the company that they should have 14 stations to monitor the waste from Wilton. But for the time being on this huge site, ICI are going to make do with 5. One of the reasons? To reduce the initial capital requirement. Greenpeace say that inadequate monitoring undermines one of the most important international agreements on pollution in the last decade.
The key thing is that this breaks a very important principle that was established at the North Sea Conference in 1987 when the ministers were all gathered there, which is something called the precautionary principle, which basically means that if in doubt, you don't pump it out. If you don't know what's in your discharge, then you can't predict at all what effects that is going to have on the marine environment, on the North Sea.
Greenpeace scientists have tried and failed to identify all the chemicals going into the Tees, let alone the quantities. Equally unsuccessful, the local council. The chairman of their planning committee told us they monitor ICI to the best of their ability, but admitted it wasn't good enough.
I mean, within their site boundary at the Wilton Works, ICI can do almost anything it pleases because it has planning powers granted to it by virtue of a private bill that was passed in the late 40s when the works was developed. It's very, very difficult for us because it means that essentially they can put up new plants, new premises, new equipment, and they don't have to tell us.
So you don't know what is going in that river?
I think the answer is we'd have difficulty.
But the greatest mystery is not what happens to ICI's chemical waste, but what they're allowed to do with their radioactive waste. We have a copy of a disposal licence which allows ICI to do all kinds of things.
Radioactive solid waste can be disposed of to the company's tips. Radioactive waste gas can be discharged into the atmosphere. Radioactive liquid waste can be discharged into the River Tees.
Neither the people nor even the council are allowed to see this document. It is a commercial secret. Greenpeace doesn't know what ICI is pouring into the Tees, nor does the local authority, and even the company seems rather vague about it. So what chance does the ordinary man in the street have of finding out what ICI can be doing to the environment? On our English journey, we've now travelled south to the outskirts of Huddersfield to meet two more people who've been trying to find things out about ICI, in their case for nearly 30 years. Alan and Sylvia Anscombe thought they discovered the ideal spot when they bought this 18-acre smallholding on the moors at Kirkheaton. But they had a neighbour, ICI.
This is the Reglone plant, Reglone herbicide. That's the nitric acid plant. And this is the powerhouse, the sulfuric acid concentrator and the oleum plant.
When these plants are erected, there's been no consideration of the interaction of the different chemicals in the atmosphere, and so one has no idea really of the total danger which must be suffered by the general public.
The Anscombes have good reason to be worried. In 1986, an emission of nitric oxide and nitrogen dioxide from the ICI plant lasted for 12 hours. The government's air pollution inspector had revealed that the leak could have been a real public danger. Their annual report said,
By good fortune, the wind carried the emission away from residential property and prevented what might have been serious consequences.
The Anscombes can see the effect of air pollution on their own farm.
Several times, mostly in the summer, we found that we had quite a lot of vegetation damage. And then we would suddenly get these scorchings and the leaves would go brown. Within a day or two, depending on the sunlight. The more sunlight, the quicker it developed. And you could pick the leaves off and they'd just crumble in your hands.
In their efforts to find more information about these emissions, the couple have built up a library of documents and letters and a mass of photographic evidence.
We've tried to get information from such official documents as we can, and of course from ICI publications, but there's still a great deal to be learned about what comes out of those chimneys.
Their photographs help prove that a gas leak in July 1987 was much more dangerous than ICI claimed. The company said it was kerosene. The Anscombes claimed it was highly toxic, a sulfuric acid mist. The Air Inspectorate confirmed the leak was a sulfuric acid mist and told ICI to make improvements to prevent similar incidents. The Anscombes' latest mission to find out about another 300-foot chimney ICI wants to build. We've now reached Cheshire and some of the best farmland in the north of England. On the surface, these fields look as unspoilt as any in Britain. But the chairman of Plumley Parish Council, Cyril Taylor, knows that there's something nasty underneath.
You may be surprised to know that the salt cavities where they've extracted brine from for the chemical and the salt industry for years is under these fields, and each of these cavities in size will accommodate St Paul's Cathedral twice over.
In every field, mysterious machinery is connected with half-buried pipes. The brine, a basic raw material for ICI, is pumped up from hundreds of feet below and then piped to nearby ICI works. Into the vast cavities created, ICI is dumping chlorinated waste, more than 400,000 gallons so far. Cyril Taylor is worried that this waste may be leaking into the local waterways.
If you go into Moss Wood, now whether it is this toxic material or whether it is brine, it is still a pollution. And if you see the considerable damage and dereliction that's taken place in that wood, trees, mature trees dying back and immature trees dying back, this cannot be right. Something is radically wrong with that particular area. And I believe it is contamination of some form from these cavities.
We decided to check out Cyril Taylor's suspicions by taking samples from the ditches around Moss Wood. We found small traces of a chlorinated compound and a toxic chemical.
The chemicals are toluene and dichloropropionol, or what would appear to be dichloropropionol. They are both toxic chemicals. Toluene could come from an environmental source as well as from a chemical dump. But with dichloropropionol, I would say that it comes almost certainly from some chemical source.
When one looks at the water and you look at the foul stuff that there's in there, this cannot be good. And how can one expect plant life or trees to re-establish under those conditions?
"20 miles to the west, the fields of Cheshire give way to Merseyside and densely populated towns like Runcorn. Two giant ICI chemical works dominate this town. The Railway Tavern is a quarter of a mile from ICI's Kastner-Kellner plant. One night last August, the landlady had just called last orders.
It was one Tuesday evening in the summer, and my small son came downstairs coughing, and everyone said, "What's the matter?" Like, he said, "I can't breathe, Mummy." So we all just said, "Oh, can't breathe? Why?" He said, "There's this smell coming through the bedroom door." And it's about 20 past 11 in the evening, so we opened the front door, and as this smell of gas came in.
There'd been a chlorine leak from the nearby plant. Everybody in the pub was locked in until 1 in the morning. It was the drinker's dream come true, to begin with.
To be actually locked in a pub, you know, locked in, isn't it? You're normally getting thrown out, so it was quite good, you know, to get locked in. A pity that we didn't have the initiative at the time to charge the drinks to ICI, but, you know, there again. I think the following day, the enormity of it came home to people, you know.
It's something that we all live in fear of in this borough, that there could be a catastrophe of a very vast magnitude. So I must be honest, I was quite frightened.
2 years earlier, following a number of gas leaks from ICI plants, the Air Pollution Inspectorate expressed concern that cutbacks and other changes in the company were leading to declining standards. ICI replied,
"We're getting fewer, not more, of these incidents, but perhaps we're not getting better as fast as the public would expect."
In the northwest, the incidents continued. Last August, spectators at the Crown Green Bowls Championship at Lostock were suddenly enveloped in ammonia gas. This August Bank Holiday Sunday, hundreds of families in the village of Frodsham were ordered to shut their windows and stay indoors because of an acid cloud from the rock salvage works. Police sealed off the M56 motorway nearby because of the leak. Such incidents help prompt the local council to hire a machine which measures air pollution. But it could only afford to do so for a month. Only one council in the country has one of these machines permanently, Sheffield. Meanwhile, in Runcorn, worries continue.
They're the ones who are down there. They're the ones where the gas came from. Whether or not they're doing enough to prevent the leaks or to ensure that it never, ever happens again, I mean, that's what I would like. I would like an assurance from somebody in ICI that that particular fault would never occur again. I can forgive one thing, which is an emergency. If it happens more than once, it's custom and practice.
We've now reached the final part of our English journey, the waterways feeding into the Mersey and out into the Irish Sea. This is the peaceful River Weaver. It's Saturday morning, match day for the Northwich Anglers Association.
It's the best river in the Northwest. It's one of the cleanest.
The fishing has been fantastic this year, much better than it's ever been over the last 30 years.
There is some good eels in. There's perch, there's bream. In fact, these are noted bream pegs rarely around here.
But the fishing doesn't stay good.
The reason I don't fish below Northwich is because the fishing's not as good. And the river tends to smell a little bit down there in places, especially around the ICI works and the Red Lion. There's little streams and sewers running in. I don't know what's coming in, but it certainly stinks.
The spoiling of the Weaver begins with this little stream, the Wade Brook. Here it is clean and clear, and it remains the same until it reaches the ICI plant at Lostock. The brook then goes under the plant and emerges on the other side looking like this. After the brook joins the Weaver, the fish in the river begin to disappear. Over the next 20 miles, the Weaver is dotted with ICI plants along its banks, 6 of them, each with legal permits to pump certain amounts of waste into it. By the time it merges into the canal system around the Mersey estuary, the water, once so rich in fish, is classified by the Water Authority D, grossly polluted. We took to the river again, this time with Greenpeace scientist Dr. Paul Johnson. He had taken samples here last year.
What do you think's in there?
Well, it's certainly part of the effluent from the plant. You can tell that because if you feel the bottle, that mud is actually warmed.
Well, how dangerous is the stuff in this bottle?
Well, certainly it's not very good for things that might like to live in the canal under normal circumstances. I mean, the first thing you notice about mud like this, of course, is there's nothing living in it.
In this stretch, there are 33 pipes pumping out effluent from 2 ICI plants. We took our own sample of the sediment and found small traces of mercury and 7 different chlorinated substances.
Among these was hexachlorobenzene at a figure of 2.4 milligrams per kilogram.
This sediment sample has a range of chlorinated chemicals in it, and they are there in worryingly high concentrations. One in particular stands out, and that's hexachlorobenzene, and it is there in concentrations 240,000 times higher than the World Health Organization guidelines for water. Now, you can't make a strict comparison between sediment and water, but nevertheless, the level that is in the sediment is worryingly high.
ICI is legally entitled to discharge chemicals into this stretch of water, but only up to levels specified in what are called consents. These consents are monitored by the Water Authority. On this canal, the Water Authority caught ICI breaking their consents over 30 times this year. On one occasion, they were pumping in 400% more methanol than they're supposed to. In fact, we've discovered from Water Authority data that since August 1985 on this stretch of the canal, they've breached their consents, an offence against the law, a total of 286 times.
How can you justify breaking the consent on the scale that you do?
Well, we don't break the consent on a large scale. Our compliance is of a very high order. We consistently achieve over 95% compliance with consent levels. On the rare occasions when we do fail to meet consent, and it can be a particular circumstance at a particular time that produces a sample outside consent, then, believe me, the authorities tell us in no uncertain terms about it, and on a number of occasions will in fact prosecute us.
Not, it seems, on this stretch of water. Despite breaking the law here 286 times, they've not been prosecuted for breaches of consent. They've only been prosecuted a handful of times nationally. Yet data from all around the country reveals that ICI has nationwide broken its consents more than 700 times since 1985.
As I've already explained, we are subject to thousands and thousands of sample taking. Almost inevitably, in a complex manufacturing operation such as ours, there will be rare occasions when we don't fully comply with the requirements on us specified by the authorities. They are relatively rare, less than 5% of the total.
Once a week on average in the last year,
and
in the last
we
4
shall
years.
not be satisfied until we have in fact achieved 100% compliance. And we're putting a lot of effort, people's time, ingenuity, and money, millions of pounds each year, into raising our standard to 100% compliance.
The government's policy, outlined by the Prime Minister last month, is to encourage companies like ICI to develop clean technologies. But the same government next week unveils the Green Bill, containing tough anti-pollution proposals. The most important, perhaps, is that companies open up the toxic books. If they do, then the public will be able to see exactly what is being dumped and pumped into the environment all around them.
Why is it those guys in